if we were standing around talking about the T in our social media, this is what we might all be talking about. It's sponsored by Hot Topic. Hot Topic is an American retail chain with nearly 700 locations, specializing in counterculture-related clothing and accessories, as well as licensed music. Hot Topic represents many varied interests of the LGBTQ plus community, including music, movies, graphic artists, gaming, and more. Hot Topic features one of the largest collections of Pride merchandise that celebrates all aspects of the LGBTQ plus community. Hot Topic is a major supporter of the diversity of our community and supports many events, festivals, and nonprofit LGBTQ plus organizations. And very notable is their support of the Trevor Project, the LGBTQ plus community's most important voice for LGBTQ plus young people. And that's why they are the sponsor of It's Happening Out's Hot Topic. Here we go. In 1965, as the civil rights movement won national and new legislation outlawing racial discrimination, the first gay rights demonstrations were taking place in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., led by longtime activist Frank Kameny and Barbara Gettings. The turning point for gay liberation came on June 28, 1969, when patrons of the popular Stonewall Inn in New York City's Greenwich Village fought back against ongoing police raids of their neighborhood bar. Stonewall is still considered a watershed moment for the entire world for gay pride and has been commemorated since the 1970s with pride marches held every June across the United States. Recent scholarship has called for better acknowledgement of the roles that drag performers, people of color, bisexuals, and transgender patrons played in the Stonewall riots. If we compare this with the 2023 situation, the community is passing through tough times where some leaders are intentionally targeting the community by passing certain laws that are against the community. Not only this, trans youth, for example, can't have operations like puberty blockers or other needed medical health care. By keeping the 2024 elections, Florida Governor DeSantis is targeting LGBTQ plus people by restricting them. In Uganda, for example, being gay is now a crime and it can lead to the death penalty. The difference between the 1960s versus 2023 is that in the beginning, people rioted, marched on the roads, and demanded their rights. And in 2023, the legislature is restricting the community from medical facilities, public drag, and much more. So our hot topic this week makes that comparison of contrast. The 1960s versus 2023. How far are we all willing to go for our rights, for citations, for incarceration, and perhaps even worse? Pride Month, June 2023. How far are we willing to go?
I'll get arrested. I don't have a problem with that. You know, like my wife's always saying, like, you know, you're always, I consider myself a pseudo-inspired person from drag, right? Like I kind of put on my drag outfit everywhere I go. And if someone were to stop me and say, hey, you can't do that, right? Like we're there. We're almost there at that point right now. And it's awful.
So I as a brown person, I'll be very clear and very honest. Florida has set it up in such a way as a brown person to go out and have to protest. Our lives are at danger.
For sure.
I might not make it home. During the George Floyd situation and things, we had a march in Wilton Manors. Parked my car at Ramrod and walked up Wilton Drive. I got harassed by two white guys in a car. So I just being harassed. I'm not even talking about the police. And so, not that I wouldn't be, but that's a whole nother level of accountability that we have to take into whether or not we're going to make it home. And that's what a lot of folks are talking about and a lot of folks are dealing with. You made the contrast of comparing then to now. At least during that time period, not as many people were being killed. You might go to jail, but you would go to jail, you may stay for a couple of days and you get bailed out. Now you may not even make it to jail. And a lot of folks are thinking that. And they're targeting our trans siblings when they protest. They're watching all those other folks are going straight for the black person or the trans person and then they're harassing them. And so I think that's the fear. And so we all come together and protect each other.
I ask all of you plainly, do you think that the majority, two opinions immediately expressed. Do you think the majority of the LGBTQ community would say that? They would say, I'm all in.
I don't think so. And I know that I was talking with Faye the other day about it because we have that national march that's coming up in July.
We the people.
With the people, July 2nd, thank you. And the first thing that I thought about was that I've never marched in my life for anything,
Really?
you know, and I'm 41 years old, you know, so the thought that, you know, I've never had that, not necessarily the opportunity because there's been opportunities, but I've never been like, okay, I need to go march for this cause because, you know, my brothers and sisters in my community is under attack, you know, so for the first time in my life, I'm feeling as though, okay, this is something that I have to participate in.
You know, that's interesting. I just want to provide contrast to what he just told us. He's 11 or 12 years old at the height of 91, 92, when we were hitting catastrophic numbers in AIDS. And ACT UP was saying, it's if we don't, we die. He's at an age where that doesn't translate yet.
And I didn't know anything about it.
Exactly. And we finished that time period. And we go into George Bush and Bush v. Gore in 2000, but it was a completely different animal. So you've missed the 1960s, and then you missed the next big time, which is the early 1990s. And now we're in 2023, and the question is, are we going to hear the alarm bell, and are we going to respond?
You know, men aren't as marginalized as women. You know, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I was marching. None of you fuckers were with me.
I was there.
You know what I mean? Like
I was in Fort Lauderdale City. I was there.
And I just had a conversation with your friend Jonathan from Care Resource, Jonathan Welsh, right? And we were talking about the lavender scare and about how all that came to pass, and the reality that would we go back in the closet? You know, some of us can pass. You know, if I don't open my big Latina mouth, you won't know that I'm a lesbian. But a lot of our siblings don't have that luxury to pass. You know, so would I stay quiet if shit got worse? And I don't know the answer to that sometimes, Al. You know, because just like when I was out there, you know, protesting for Roe v. Wade and nothing happened, you know, like those are the kind of sentiments that I feel.
You know, one other thing that I want to put in front of us, we have, in my lifetime, you know, I'm definitely the oldest person at this table. In my lifetime, I have never, and I watched the 70s. I lived through AIDS in the 80s, and especially to like 95, 96, which was the worst of the worst. Bush v. Gore, the lead up to gay marriage in 2015, the election of Donald Trump, and what happened. I could pass, so therefore I'm not attacked in that way. I have never in my life seen a situation where, like at Stonewall Pride, of what we're watching in authoritarianism in the governor's mansion in Florida, where the motivation of that authoritarianism, some people call it fascism, is so specific and spear-oriented because of his desire to be president of the United States. I have never had a single experience in my life that's leading up to June 17th, for example, because we could have thousands of people in drag and somebody say, unacceptable. What would they do? And what would we do in response? And we're kind of in a tender moment in that, is it possible, like in 92 and 93, when ACT UP is saying all we need to do is light one match and there's a gigantic explosion? We're at that moment. But I can't tell that the gay community understands that.
But I also think, and I agree with you, I, to your point, to answer your question, I would risk, I've marched with my trans siblings when Trans Day of Remembrance, and they're living, expressing, wanting to be seen, wanting to live. I marched with teachers for vote for voting. I marched with when our siblings lost their control of their bodies. We would do that, but the problem is, what you said was very important. Our governor has made it in such a way to eliminate that ability safely, because in those days, it was different. It was a different era. You could march. You had that freedom of ability to speak your mind as long as you didn't cross certain lines. But the moment that you speak your mind and that person feels offended, they can then take your life into their hands and make X, Y, and Z decisions. And so I think that we can march and we need to march, but we have to be worried about this political climate because it's happening in New York now. It's happening all across the country where they're targeting folks who they can make a deal out of for those people who are running for president and say, look what we did. We stopped them from getting in your way.
Al, I think that we have fallen in love with kind of an echo chamber activism, too, with the advent of social media, where we think that because we're posting this really strong, well-worded opinion and that 20 people have liked it, that we've done something that is activism. And really, it's an echo chamber. You've unfriended the people who don't agree with you. They're not in your social circle, but we think, you know, hey, I'm saying something, I'm standing up, I'm doing something. Really, the only thing that social media is good for in that sense is getting people together for actual protests, for actual action.
The marketing of the
Yeah,
event.
posting to your friends is not activism.
Isn't it concerning? And I don't know, maybe I kind of feel sometimes I'm the only one who sees this, and I really hope I find others who see it that way. But even nowadays, not only people my age, people older than me, party gays especially, won't do anything verbally, action-wise, until it directly affects them, until they can't have their pool parties, until they can't have their street dances.
If you don't mind, I want to interrupt you to ask on that point, do you think one of the things that we're heading for, we're like a speeding bullet to that point, that for women, you talk about the road protest, for Black, for trans, for Latino, for other people of color, for religious diversity, that a principal white gay face is going to go, sorry, doesn't affect me, and so therefore I'm not coming in.
Heck,
All the time.
yeah, it's happening now.
happening now.
It's happening all the time. And I actually want to push back against you over the social media thing, because if some people don't have the ability to walk, stand, and run with a group of people. And so all they have is that voice in social media. So if they're educating that person, that family member who may have a bias, and they're able to listen to you, and you can change one mind through that social media post, you've made a difference. And so we have to give everyone their opportunity, whatever it looks like. If it's just standing in your front lawn with a bullhorn, you made a difference.
I'm not talking about that one person who's the exception. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of gay men who spend hours on Grindr, hours on social media, and then don't show up at the march. I respect your example and pushback, but that's not.
But one last question related to that. Do we project June 17th here in South Florida, later in the year in St. Pete, later in the month in St. Pete, and as the rest of the Pride season unveils, is the gay community going to show up, and are we going to say this is a protest?
Not
are
so
we?
many that should.
We're going to show up. Whether or not they're going to say it's a protest is very different, but we are going to show up, and their protest is going to be showing up. So we have to now utilize our verbiage very clear. Is my showing up the protest, or is my showing up just showing up and being in this space? And then how do we then change it into a protest? Is going to be where the lines need to be drawn. But I do believe that folks are going to come. I do believe that folks are going to celebrate their queerness. I do believe that folks are going to say, guess
Do you all
what?
agree with that?
I don't agree. I've high doubts about it, because I mean, even this past weekend, the national march that's coming up, I spent a couple hours on Sunday morning inviting probably over 500 people on my Facebook page to the event. And I got messages back from a lot of my friends, majority of them saying that this doesn't concern them. You know, they're not going to go. Like, why do I have to do this? Am I being paid for this? You know, like those type of things. Or is this like a Pride festival? Or
Is there a DJ?
Is there a pool party?
Yes.
You know, who's performing? Those are some of the comments. You know, so it's like, oh, no, like it's a national march. It's a protest. You know, and they're like, oh no, I'll skip it.
So may I give you a realistic story? I shared this with
That is a realistic story.
it is.
It happened.
I'm giving you my realistic. I apologize. You have me right. But it goes back to Al's point. If it doesn't affect them, they're not going to come. But I have a cousin from a different state who has a young child, I guess, is trying to find their way. She reached out and she says, I want to bring him to Wilton Manors Pride because he needs to see what Wilton Manors Pride has and see that thing. So that's why, and again, I apologize, words matter. My realistic story is that it does happen and people are doing it. I'm just one. But I was great back to that point. If it doesn't affect you personally.
That was me.
Well, I mean, no, you asked the question.
The
you
other fat
responded
white
to
guy.
it.
We all want to hope.
Yeah.
But we're to a place where hope is not good enough anymore. All right.
We'll see who shows up.
We are Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only live daily LGBTQ+ evening news show from Happening Out Television Network. In the model of PBS and NPR, we educate, inform, and entertain by supporting the 10 pillars of the LGBTQ+ community, with more than 100,000 a week watching on Roku, Apple Television, and other channels. To keep the stories going, we accept donations with 100% transparency. Stay updated and live authentically with Queer News Tonight.